point goes to our Dangle. And thank you very much, Dangle, for that $100 support. And we appreciate that very, very much. Also, generous support. And he said, I was just in Bahrain before all of this, and I was perplexed by the palm trees as well. And they each had their own moat and a hose spooled up inside of it with holes. And I used to imagine how much money and water it took to keep those damn things alive. and what do you think and thinks?
I have a feeling
They got the money, man. They've got the money in Bahrain. They got that oil money. You know what I'm saying? Like the oil money, that gives you unlimited access to all the water you need for all the palm trees you want, for the most part. So, also, by the way, some of these are growing naturally, actually, like right here. Like these don't even have their little moats around them.
Yeah, I mean, like it's really interesting, honestly. The Middle East, they like what's really interesting, folks, and this was actually something I learned in college, is that water availability is a humongous thing in most areas of the world. Like, if you ever hear of a war being fought for a natural resource, 9 times out of 10, it's about water. That's the craziest thing. There have been entire wars fought in recent times, actually, over who has the rights to what water coming from where. And the Middle East generally doesn't really have that problem because they literally have basically no water, especially if we're talking about the area of the Arabian Peninsula. There's literally no water here almost, as far as fresh water goes. Now, if you go up to the Tigris and Euphrates in Iraq, that's a different story. But for most of the region, basically no water. The areas of Israel and Lebanon, though, and the coast of Syria, they're actually very fortunate because of the sort of I guess you could say temperature shifts and the wind currents within the area of the Eastern Mediterranean. They actually get a lot of precipitation, and that's why this area is a lot more luscious than the areas directly beyond the mountain ranges that head you into Damascus and elsewhere in the Middle East. But
you see the beauty of it though is if you have a whole bunch of money because you're just like rich out the wazoo, which pretty much these oil countries are for the most part, all they have to do is simply say, here, to go build another desalination plant, and that's what they do. They'll go build a desalination plant. These countries here actually rely quite heavily on that, and that's why Iran's trying to strike them.
Yeah, that's actually what I was about to get to. I was about to say, however, the modern day and the oil industry actually brought in a humongous amount of money. And generally, they're currently trying to diversify their economies because eventually, over the past 70, 80 years or so, a lot of these Middle Eastern monarchs started to realize, wait a minute, it's not a good thing to have the entire economy reliant on one single economic output. Maybe we need to diversify, and that's why the UAE is getting heavy into tourism stuff. I think that might change, though, because I heard that a lot of Alpha Chad social media bros are getting arrested right now for publishing footage in the UAE, so that might start to change. That might not be a good thing for them, or people might just ignore it and not give a damn. Who knows? But beyond that, Bahrain has a ton of money, so generally, it's not the people who are paying for it, it's the Bahrainian government with the desalination plants and such. And it is exorbitantly expensive to run a desalination plant. I think the Bahrainians have several of them, as a matter of fact, and they just basically take their oil money and then just pump it right into projects like desalination plants, and that's why they have the water to be able to keep a lot of the stuff alive, because if they weren't doing that, the place would look, let me see if I can drop you down on this highway right here. The entire island will look like that, because that's what it naturally is. Anything that's green and growing on this island is basically an artificial construct made by the water given to them by the desalination plants. I mean, they even have a golf course. I mean, that's unnatural.
I mean, that's a luscious golf course, by the way. That's like the deep green grass. It's almost like fake looking to a degree. But also, by the way, unfortunately, I have gotten some bad news here. We've gotten another angle showing apparently the drone strike. It looks like, I can't say it with certainty still, but it does appear that the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, has likely been hit by something, most likely an Iranian Shahed drone, it looks like. It looks like we are seeing the compound itself, and it looks like there is smoke emanating from the side of the compound. So I would say leaning towards saying that it got directly hit. It could be debris, possibly. That could be what's causing this fire and also the smoke, but I would lean toward a direct hit. Also, by the way, of course, we have more news after this, but if you want to weigh in on this real quick, go right ahead.
Oh, we can just move on to the rest of the news because that's just generally said and done sort of a affair right here.
So we also have a bad piece of news coming out of the United States. I did not repost this, by the way, because we really can't sadly show the video. But there is a massive fire on I-471 near Memorial Parkway in Cincinnati, Ohio right now. And it looks, I don't know if maybe like an oil truck or something blew up and caught fire, but it's literally engulfing almost the entire interstate from the looks of it to a large degree. It's a humongous fire right in the middle of the road. And it looks like it just happened, apparently, just a short little while ago. So not sure, like, you know, these days, like with the sleeper cell threat being very high, we have a tendency in the public to say that everything's a possible terrorist attack. It could just be an accident. These things do happen, of course, but, you know, these days you got to second guess it because there's so many, like, you know, threats of bad actions being taken. So we don't know yet, but something happening in Ohio on the interstate.
Very interesting, and we'll have to keep an eye on that and see what they report on that later. But with that, I hope that does address that well to Dr. Dangle. A huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that in mind, moving us out of our breaking news, it's time for us to get back into our normal news coverage and moving us on into Tehran. In the greater Tehran metropolitan area, we were able to report explosions that did occur within Karaj. Take a look. You hear the explosions in the distance. You see another one right there.
Oh, shoot. Damn, I wasn't expecting that. What was that?
I don't even know. Like, I have no clue.
I think it's fair to say it was a missile.
Probably. What type, though? I don't know. That wasn't a Tomahawk. But moving on from that and on to our next clip, we also were able to hear that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has sworn total destruction. Our naval forces attacks will continue until all American terrorist bases, gee, that's rich, in the region are destroyed. Keep wishing, buddy. I mean, like, really. I mean, like, they might be getting us right now, folks, in the Strait of Hormuz. But stupid statements like that, it's like, oh, really? It's like, no, that's not happening. We also were able to see it within Tehran over the course of the day that power did shut off within some areas of the city and the attacks that are currently happening. And we've also been able to see the besieged becoming so scared of overhead drone attacks by the United States and Israel that they're now setting up their military checkpoints inside of tunnels.
Look at this. Like, they have cones and stuff. Like, this is unbelievable. Like, safety first for the besieged forces. That's almost a laughable.
Honestly, it's pretty ridiculous. You know what else is ridiculous is that this is a pretty long tunnel. They better hope it has good ventilation. Hadim, I'm feeling a little woozy. Like, it's gasoline smell. It's getting to me. It's like, well, I mean, you know, I hope that it's ventilated, you know. They're about to get ventilated. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see that the eastern district of Tehran was bombed today. This is smoke from the aftermath. We also see more airstrikes coming in as well.
You guys taking it in stride right here.
Man, that guy's like, I gotta get a word. Like, just like, you guys' priorities straight, I suppose, you know, maybe. We've also seen some other clips coming from the central area of the city as well. It does appear that the United States was able to successfully hit and destroy the Iranian Space Research Center. That's what it looked like. This center was responsible for various space activities of Iran, including development of satellites, space propulsion, and tests of space components. You can actually see the remains of that building right there. It appears to half of it collapsed. Moving on from that and out of that little bit of news, it's time for us to get on into the next piece inside of Tehran, where we were able to see clips of more heavy strikes within the city. There we are. Just a large aerial bombardment, one of several dozen that's happened over the past 2 weeks.
Oh, damn. Terra in Tehran.
Oh, Briaga. Man, I gotta tell you, they're really hitting them.
Kind of sucks. For the Tehranians.
Oh, there's another.
Oh, wow. That's what it sounds like in the country when those like dump trucks pull up and dump the dirt out of the back, and then that like door like on the back of a dump truck swings closed. It makes that same sound, something like a bomb going off.
Yeah, honestly, it does really. Like you actually got that pretty dead on the nail right there. That's kind of what I was thinking as well. But moving on from that and out of Tehran, we also were able to move ourselves further on and towards the area of Baghdad, as we were able to hear that air raid sirens were sounding right before the stream went live, and there were also explosions in central Baghdad, which appears to have also directly affected the U.S. Embassy within the area of central Baghdad. We've also heard, unfortunately, folks, that the United States search and rescue efforts last night have been able to confirm that the KC-135 that went down last night was nearly completely lost. At this point, they have found the remains of 4 crew members out of the 6 that were on board the aircraft. 2 are still unaccounted for, but largely are being presumed dead at the moment, although they have not been able to find the remains of those service members anywhere within the debris or the wreckage on the ground. This is also leading us to believe that whatever the giant large fireball was near the Saudi-Iraqi border probably was that KC-135, and some sort of a critical explosion probably happened on board after the mid-air collision with the other KC-135 that was actually able to limp itself on home and land back at Tel Aviv. So very unfortunate to hear, and it's, of course, another tragedy to see that a significant loss of life within the U.S. Armed Forces has occurred, and hopefully we'll be able to see that they can generally start to change air operations or standard operational procedures for aircraft at close distances like that, so that way we don't hear of another collision like that happening again. But moving on from that, and out of that news, we are going to be moving on down into Saudi Arabia, as we were able to hear that the United States has apparently moved 10,000 interceptor drones developed in Ukraine to the Middle East as it looks to repel Iranian attacks without using up high-cost missile defenses, according to the Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll. So it appears that we are going to be using Ukrainian interceptor drones to be able to further defend against incoming threats. We've also been able to hear that some aerial tankers were damaged at the Prince Sultan Air Base. The Prince Sultan Air Base did take a couple of direct hits over the war so far, and according to 2 U.S. officials, 5 U.S. tankers were struck and damaged while on the ground at Prince Sultan and during an Iranian ballistic missile strike. And per one official, the battle damage to the tankers was not enough to destroy them, and they are currently being repaired. No one was killed in the strikes, according to the report, but that does mean that at this moment, 5 of the tankers at Prince Sultan have been grounded while these repairs are ongoing. And moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit, we have also been able to see that apparently 5,000 Marines are currently going to be built up inside the Middle East, which we generally talked about a little bit earlier. So we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit, which is going to be around the area of Salalah, as we were able to also confirm that it appears that the oil depot was hit and burning profusely 3 days later after the original attack that we had covered on air.
Damn. I mean, I can't see. The ocean's so loud, I can't see.
Man, honestly, that ocean is loud. Like, it's like, dang, could they turn that down? But moving on from that, and out of that bit of news, it's now time for us to move on over towards Israel. Iran's ballistic missile capabilities, at least in terms of firing them, are running low. A large amount of TELs have been destroyed. We did get the report, however, that some Iranian missiles that were fired over the day did actually land and hit their marks. However, this clip here is actually of some in-air interceptions that occurred over the course of the day inside of Israel. I wouldn't actually be able to tell you all the exact location. It was near to a power plant somewhere within Israel, and we actually were able to see the in-air interceptions happening right over the power plant. So let's take a look. We hear the air raid sirens going off. And here in a moment, we'll actually see, there it is, the in-air interceptor is being fired. These might be Iron Domes, possibly. And we see another 2 of them being fired. And there comes the incoming Iranian missile, and it was a direct hit.
Damn. Is this guy speaking, is he speaking like Israeli or like, what's he speaking?
He's speaking like a mix of Hebrew and English.
Speaking Israeli. I couldn't think of Hebrew, like, for whatever reason. I was just speaking Israeli.
I don't speak Spanish, I speak American. Like, I don't speak Mexican, damn it. Like, but a successful in-air interception, to say the least. I don't know why the guy's running now. It's like the threat's over. It's like it was shot down. You filmed it. But moving on from that, we did see an unfortunate hit within the area of Beersheba in southern Israel, which you can see in that clip right there, unfortunately. But that's the end of that clip. And moving us on from that, we've also been able to confirm that there was another hit within central Israel near to the Tel Aviv area, and first responders were attempting to battle the blaze and generally put it out. So that does generally confirm that Iran is landing a few hits. We believe that most of them are being caused by the cluster rounds that the Islamic Republic of Iran are using against Israel. And I also have to point out, folks, and this is something a little interesting, something that a lot of people haven't pointed out so far. Cluster bombs of any type being used against a populated area, even if enemy combatants are within the populated area, is strictly forbidden in every version of the Geneva Convention and the modern international laws pertaining to warfare. I find that a little bit interesting that nobody's pointed that out so far, because the Ukrainians have had to go through significant rules of engagement procedures when using any sort of cluster rounds. They can only use them in non-urban areas. They can't even use them in an urban area if there are no civilians present, and we rarely ever see them being used because of that. Interestingly enough, Iran has been firing these cluster bomb type missiles at Israel for weeks, 2 weeks, and nobody's really pointed out how much of a war crime that is for the Iranians to do that. They are hitting civilian infrastructure all over the country and are causing what we would understand to be some form of civilian casualties, and yet we don't really ever see anyone pointing out that the Iranians are quite flagrantly violating international law and the Geneva Convention by using those sorts of cluster rounds on a populated area. A little bit interesting to me on that one. But moving on from that, it is time for us to finally get out of the Middle East and move you all over and into East Asia. It's time, folks, for the news in East Asia. But before we do, a lot of people have been hearing, and I do have to cover this little bit of news as well. I didn't put it down on the map, but it's basically Litani 2.0. The Israelis are going to be re-invading southern Lebanon, which they had only withdrawn from about a year and a half ago, to try and deal with and destroy Hezbollah once and for all. And a lot of people are wondering whether that's a good idea for the IDF to push into southern Lebanon up to the bank of the Litani River, which means that generally they're going to push up about this far, where you'll see that little river right there. That's as far as they'll push up, and then they'll stop there. So what are people thinking about that, Matthew, or are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so now that we're hearing that Israel plans to open up a major ground invasion back into Lebanon in the southern part near the Litani River, do you think this is a good move, or is it too much? 53% said yes, it's time to fix the problem again, 2.0. While 29% said no, Israel is going overboard on this one, and 9% said I'm 50-50 on this action. So, hot take, Lebanon has a problem because Hezbollah is very much intertwined with the Lebanese leadership, at least when it comes to their government. So that's a bit of an issue. I think recently the government's generally trying to distance themselves from Hezbollah, but that's only because we're seeing obviously a war breakout, and now Hezbollah is attacking Israel, and Israel is counterattacking. So when it's convenient, they're kind of like intertwined with Hezbollah. When it's inconvenient, they kind of push them away a little bit. So Lebanon's got some issues, to say the least. So, hot take, I'm kind of 50-50 on this action. I will say the only risk behind this action is, of course, Israel is still getting attacked by Iran, and Iran still has the ability to attack Israel. So committing this many ground forces to a ground invasion into Lebanon, that is a little bit risky slightly on that front, but it's probably an acceptable risk for Israel for the most part. So I will probably see this happen, and it'll likely just be the same thing we saw the last time for the most part. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I would be with the 54%. I think it is time to fix the problem. The Lebanese government is almost a pseudo-terrorist state due to the fact that Hezbollah has official political representation within the Lebanese parliament, and also due to the fact that the Lebanese government has been completely ineffectual on trying to deal with and stop the threat of Hezbollah, not only within their borders, but to their surrounding neighbors. Hezbollah is engaged in armed combat with Israel and the new Syrian interim government over just the past year alone, and that makes them a significant threat, not only to the country they're inside of, but to every other country that borders the nation of Lebanon. So for that reason, I would say that it generally is time to deal with this and see that Hezbollah can be dealt with generally once and for all. Before we move on, though, I saw a lot of people talking about, well, oh, that's really ridiculous to call out an Iranian war crime. I mean, the Israelis conducted endless war crimes in the Gaza Strip. If you're saying that, you have not been around this channel long enough, because we've pointed that out a million times. Like, I just want to, bring that to attention. If you think that we're unfair in calling out what looks like possible war crimes or atrocities against civilians in war, you haven't been around the block on this channel long enough to know that we don't hold punches on saying that people are causing unnecessary amounts of civilian suffering or violating the Geneva Convention or international laws pertaining to the rules of war on any of those topics. So maybe you need to be around the channel long enough to know that, but you know, some people need to get a little bit more learned about what we're about on this channel. But moving on from that, it is time for us to finally move on and over into the area of the East China Sea. And moving us on into the area of the East China Sea, something interesting has happened today. This has happened once before, and it's happened again this year. And it's a fairly concerning sort of a thing. China has a very interesting way that they run their fishing fleets. Their fishing fleets almost operate like a paramilitary force. And that is something that is very interesting, at least to me, because if you look at American naval forces, they're generally official. Fishing boats don't fall even within a paramilitary or militia-like force for the U.S. Navy. In China, however, they do. And we were able to hear that once again, much like they did last year, thousands, literal thousands, we believe about 2,000 Chinese fishing boats have reportedly been massing in geometric formations in the East China Sea near to Taiwan. This is something that is fairly concerning, and I hope that we will be able to find a little bit of an example, or at least some geolocation of the vessels that did this last year, because it's actually very wild to watch. I mean, this line spanned the entire length of the East China Sea, pretty much from just north of the Senkaku Islands, all the way up to around the island of Jeju on the South Korean peninsula. It's a pretty wild sort of a thing to watch, and they would actually order them to shift around and move, and they would all move almost in unison. It's a fairly wild sort of a thing, and these are actually some of the vessels here that would have been involved. These are civilian boats that have been drilled by the People's Liberation Army since 2012. And these things generally almost operate like a military. A lot of y'all might know this group unknowingly, because that is the same group that went up towards the Alaskan coast, from what we know, and ended up making the snow crabs magically disappear, basically in a single season. And then when we went up there again, we went, where the hell did all the snow crabs go? And then China just had this mysteriously large amount of snow crab for sale at the same time in most markets in China.
Man, they put it for sale at the wet market. I tell you what, it's like, what, we have an abundance of snow crab. It's like, I wonder why. It's like, I wonder if it has something to do with that massive, like, dragnet you put out that took everybody's snow crab.
Man, like, honestly, man, like, straight up. But outside of that, this is a fairly interesting sort of an act, and clearly a low-level coercion effort by the People's Republic of China. These sorts of larger actions are to intimidate countries within the surrounding area, because while they are fishing boats, they are in the thousands. It's generally going off of the concept, they'll run out of ammo before we run out of fishing boats, kind of a concept, in support for amphibious landings or naval operations by the Chinese Navy. And so a lot of people are wondering, what's up with this? Is this a prelude to invasion? Is this saber rattling? Major military drill? What are people thinking about it, Matthew? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so a very concerning development, of course. These are generally fishing boats, but they're kind of not fishing boats. They're kind of fishing boats. Nobody's really sure, but they're making some weird geometric patterns right off Taiwan. So that's a little bit of a cause for concern. So what are your thoughts? 36% said China is simply saber rattling, while 35% said it's a prelude to invasion, and 21% said that it's simply a major military drill. So also, by the way, I have a hunch here about this, but first of all, let me confirm something. Is that Marine Expeditionary Unit coming from Japan?
Yes.
So I think this is basically a 4D chess move by China. This is my hunch about the whole situation. I think what China's doing is they've deployed these fishing boats knowing that the Marine Expeditionary Unit was going to be heading out from Japan to the Middle East, and they're trying to make the U.S. rethink sending that expeditionary group. I think that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to make them think, hey, wait a minute, could we be seeing possibly an invasion of Taiwan soon? Is that what the fishing boats are about? Maybe we should rethink sending out the Marines from Japan, possibly. That might be what they're thinking, possibly. That's the only thing I can generally come up with. I don't think this is a prelude to invasion. I was talking to Andrew about this before the stream started. I don't really see anything holding China back, but at the same time, though, I think China's also a little bit perplexed by the rapid escalations in the Middle East as well. So they're probably trying to observe for a little while before they pull anything off. So I think it might be a 4D chess move, actually. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I generally believe it is a low-level coercion effort, or what we would call saber rattling in the poll. I think that the Chinese are still trying to work on their amphibious landing capabilities, but in the meantime, they're definitely trying to conduct major shows of force while the U.S. is being distracted elsewhere to make countries like Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea think that, you know, Big Daddy might not be around to help out all too much if things start going south. So that might be what they're trying to do with this, but I don't think they're getting ready for some sort of an invasion coming here soon. I still think, folks, honestly, that if an invasion window is soon, it's probably going to start at around the beginning of 2027, about a year from now. But I don't think it's going to be anytime imminently soon, like within the next few weeks or months, say, or even by the latter part of this year. I think that still would generally be out of the picture for now, but they're definitely trying to intimidate all of our allies that are in the region on the first island chain.
Yeah, maybe possibly so, but you know, like I was saying earlier, I'm not really sure what would hold China back, because you got to remember we're bogged down already in the Middle East, and also we have ambitions in South America as well that we're currently exercising also. So we're expending missiles at a rapid rate. We're currently looking at possibly a ground invasion of Karg Island, possibly in Iran. So I mean, if China was going to invade, I mean, if I was in charge of China right now, I'd be looking at possibly doing something. Not saying that they should, because it would still be very unwise to do it. But, you know, if there is any time that they might go for it, it seems like sometime in the next couple of months might be the time. So I'm not sure if they'll actually go for it or not, but we'll have to see. Because it's hard to predict the Taiwan situation, because there's been a lot of setbacks for the Chinese on that situation, and also a lot of second guessing. So I'm not really sure, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll generally have to see on that, that's for sure. But moving on from that and on into Pakistan and Afghanistan, we've been able to hear that the Taliban is accusing Pakistan of conducting targetings of civilian homes and overnight airstrikes in Kabul and the southern province of Kandahar, saying that children were among those killed. So generally what the Taliban is saying right now is that the Pakistanis are conducting acts of terrorism against Afghanistan. Does anyone spot the irony in that?
I don't see really any irony in it. It just sounds crazy talk. Sounds like something that AI wrote.
Kind of does, but generally that's what they're saying right now. Just to let y'all know, the border war between the two countries is still going on, and also, by the way, Pakistan is still steamrolling the Taliban. So we don't really have a lot to show for that today, because we have to move on to a whole bunch of other news, but still pretty interesting to know with all that going on the borders of those two countries still. Moving on from that, it's time for us to get down into the United States of America. We were able to see some video footage of some B-2 bombers at Whiteman Air Force Base. Look at the pretty little creatures. Can't really see a lot of them.
I can't see it. All I see, it looks like a UFO. Oh my God, look at this. I don't want to see that coming my direction.
Oh,
come on, please,
God.
please. Please, sir, spare us.
No! But we also heard down in Havana that apparently the current president of Cuba is currently in talks with the U.S. administration. We don't know what the talks are attempting to achieve, but they're currently in talks at the moment. We have also been able to hear some additional news today out of the area around Washington, D.C., as there was a ground stop declared at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, the Washington Dulles International Airport, and the Baltimore Washington International Airport, which are the three major airports, regional and international, that surround the area of Washington, D.C. We don't know what that was for, and at the same time, Air Force One took off from Andrews Air Force Base, so it appears that there was some sort of an incident that happened today. I'm assuming it might have been something along the lines of a bomb threat or something like that, that saw that a lot of, the ground stop was issued. But we really don't know why, because the civil authorities within the area haven't issued an official statement as to why that ground stop was ordered and why it went on for several hours. Moving on from that, we've also been able to hear within Washington, D.C. as well, another interesting thing. Now, I cannot show you all this clip. This is highly copyright, but I can tell you all what it was said in the clip. The presenter here on this podcast actually asked the President of the United States who in the world was largely in charge of the planning of the operation and whether advisors disagreed with him. And the President then went on to state that advisors do disagree with him, but he eventually gets them all on his side. He negotiates them to do it his way on everything. So, generally, that's kind of leading credence to our analysis that we had on the channel, that if there is any fault that lies within any of the planning so far, it probably falls on the President. Because apparently the military advisors are just there for traditional or ceremonial purposes, but they actually don't have any ability to advise the President. The President just tells them what he wants to do, and they either do that or else, apparently, is what we're guessing at this point. So, just to put that out there, and I know a lot of people are about to make the de facto statements, which are common sense. The president is the commander-in-chief, he has the final say, but generally the commander-in-chief has also never served in the military and has certainly never been a general in the armed forces of any of the branches to even understand what larger strategic operations are even conducted and done. So generally it would be important for someone with his experience to lean heavily on his advisors, which would be the top generals of the armed forces like the Joint Chiefs of Staff and such. But apparently, he's not listening to them. He's just telling them what he wants to do. And if they know better, they can't really exercise their knowledge or expertise to know better, because eventually he's just going to get his way no matter what. Anyway, so
also, it's like, you know, he said he was basically convinces them to see it his way for the large part. Also, he said there was rarely any disagreements, which I find that kind of hard to believe, because I don't think the military experts and the president are going to have the same line of thinking. I feel like it's not the case. But, you know, it's interesting, though. The way it's supposed to work is this. The president is not expected to be a military expert unless they've served in the military, which is not commonplace. So if it's understood that they're not military experts. That's why they have a whole team of advisors. They have the Joint Chiefs. They have all these people that actually are supposed to know what they're doing, including a whole bunch of intelligence experts and people like that. So he's supposed to get them all together. They're supposed to have a big meeting, and they're supposed to make decisions based on the advice of the advisors. The president has the final choice on the situation, but he's not supposed to be, you know, basically taking the reins. That's not supposed to be the way it's supposed to work. So it's kind of interesting that generally he's coming up with his own plan, and he's convincing the other people to see it his way, and basically going with what he wants to do, because it's kind of strange. He's not a military expert. So a little bit odd with that, to say the least. So long story short, I do want to say this. I generally want to say apologies to the military out there, because I've said, I think over the past week or so, I've said there's been a lack of planning here. Apparently it's not from the military. It sounds like the military might, the military knows what they're doing, let's just put it that way. It sounds like they're getting overridden for a large part, so it's not their fault. It's the fact that they're not being allowed, apparently, to carry out what they want to carry out. At least that's what it sounds like.
Also, by the way, I see some people, of course, bringing up the usual gripes and counter-arguments and such. And let me say this really quickly. We say what would be a smart idea to do and not to do here on the channel, but also at the same time, I think a lot of people need to understand there's a little bit of a detachment between us and the president. I'm not the president of the United States, and I'm not the one who actually calls these shots. If I was the one in the position of being the president of the United States, y'all aren't going to hear me sitting there with all of the generals, the Joint Chiefs of Staff and stuff, gathered around the Situation Room in the White House, and then me telling them how things are going to go. That would be ridiculous. I mean, sure, I can speak a pretty good yarn, spin a good yarn here on YouTube, but when there's a whole bunch of people's lives at stake, there is really no room for being the sole and singular expert in the room and being an absolute genius. You really have to start bouncing stuff off of other people, especially the people who actually are career officers who have risen through the ranks to general, because it would automatically be assumed that they're going to be a lot more competent at military planning and strategy than the president, considering that they've made that their entire career, and the president is only going to be around for 4 to 8 years, depending on how many times he's elected or re-elected. So generally, you know, that's not really a good sounding sort of thing, and I think that's kind of leading us all to kind of understand why the legislative reviews was overlooked, is because it might not have been considered to be that big of a deal. It actually appears that might be the case, because there has been a little bit of additional news that came out today that I'd like to read you all here really quickly. And I do want to say that this is reportedly the case, and this is what we're hearing right now, apparently from the Wall Street Journal. But before the start of the operation, General Dan Kane supposedly told the president several times that an American attack could prompt Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz, stating that U.S. officials had long believed Iran would deploy mines, drones, and missiles to close the world's most vital shipping lane in the case of a full-scale war with the U.S. The president then acknowledged the risk, moving forward with his decision to launch widespread attacks against Iran alongside Israel, telling his team that he believed Iran would likely capitulate before closing the Strait of Hormuz, and even if Iran tried, the situation could be quickly handled by the U.S. Navy, according to people with knowledge of discussions who spoke to the Wall Street Journal. So that's what the Wall Street Journal is stating. Some people privy to the matter said to them, we don't know those people. Of course, this is allegedly, but this is I'm not gonna lie, like, while we cannot confirm this outright, this kind of seems to be leaning into what the president's already publicly said at this point, as in he basically knows all the answers and his advisors are there for him to basically win them all over by just, you know, telling them this is how it is. So it's more of an interesting with that on the military planning side of things.
It seems like if it seemed like the president would have given an example when he was addressing that question, and he said he just basically convinces people to see it his way if they don't necessarily agree. It seems like he was also taking the opportunity to add in that he does also concede to the experts occasionally, like when he thinks they are right, makes logical sense. I didn't hear it. He said it. I personally didn't hear it in that the clip that we got there. He didn't really say he was deferring to anybody for the most part. He was saying that he was pretty much convincing them to see it his way. So unless maybe he just misspoke or something, it seems a bit strange to me. Because I mean, this common sense tells me if I was the president, I would be hoping that the experts were in a consensus, that they're all on the same page, and I consider with allowed their question most part because they have been the war tolerant and they're experts. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't want to be the know-it-all because if something goes wrong, then Jeff says he's going to get blamed for it. And I wouldn't want to take the blame.
And also, I saw someone say the military overlooking Strait of Hormuz. That's not what we're saying. I'll explain really quickly because this is how the government actually works at that level when conducting the war. Is that the president is the commander-in-chief and he has the final say. The military knows the Strait of Hormuz. In any written literature that's been published by the military to the public, the Strait of Hormuz has been highlighted as far as any sort of threat that Iran poses as being the most significant threat that they can face to the United States and generally global oil stability. So, with that in mind, the military clearly knew, and it clearly ingrained in anyone who would be involved in the Iran war and planning, the importance of the Strait of Hormuz. But this is how it probably from the top. One of those generals, like maybe example, General Kane said, Mr. President, I've been told by my people who put together the war plan that the Strait of Hormuz is an incredibly important facet of the conflict, and we should divert war firepower away from trying to strike key targets within Iran and more towards ensuring that the Strait of Hormuz remains open for global oil supply. No, that's not the case at all, General. You don't know what you're talking about. If we didn't then the whole government will collapse, and we don't even have to worry about the Strait of Hormuz. So let's just bomb Iran, cut off the head of the snake, and it'll all go fine. Mr. President, I don't really think that's a good idea. Shut the hell up and do what I say, or else you can resign. Yes, Mr. President, I'll go get on that right away. And that's probably how that went, because at the end of the day, that general has two options, or any general has two options. They can either, yes, Mr. President, I need to do exactly what you're saying, or they can resign and their career is effectively over immediately. So that's kind of the options that you have. So, generally, if anyone's going to have the fall or the blame fall on it, it can't be a general. I mean, apparently the generals aren't really the ones who were giving most support. If they were the ones advising the president was going off their plans and the war was failing, then a general might be to blame for that, for bad advice or bad advisement or a bad strategy. But if the president's the one overriding everyone, basically telling them how everything's going to be, the failing will fall to the president if this war does not go well. That's how that would happen. But moving on from that, it is time for us to move out of the region and back into the area of the Mediterranean, because now we're starting to get a little bit closer to our Russia news. And we've been able to take a little look at that LNG tanker that was down in that train that caught on fire a little while ago. You know the one man that burned as bright as the sun? Well, that's what it looks like.
Holy! Oh my God!
No, man!
Like, what in the hell? Like, the paint has been stripped off the back. What am I looking at? Like, it's more than just the paint being stripped off. It's like it's turned into goo, like in the back. And what's up with that?
The heat was so hot, it's burned up some of the metal, and that's why it kind of looks like Jello back there.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. That thing's even floating at this point.
Man, I gotta say, I mean, like, it's crazy. I mean, the damage. Look at the damage on both ends. It's unreal. This vessel's a complete loss. Man, boy, after I pay all my lab coats and my scientists, it's a wash. Well, why do you do it, baby poop? Because I'm a heartless guy.
Oh man, right now, I tell you what, I don't mind seeing a little Russian loss every once in a while.
Man, like, the Russians are about to put this thing up for sale. They're going to say it was only sailed once, handled lightly, no low ballers. I know what I got.
Of course, allegedly, of course.
Allegedly, of course. We always had to put that one. Moving on from that, and out of that little bit of news, we're now going to be moving on to Paris, as we have it in the French and the Italians are trying to talk to the Iranians in hopes that they will open the Strait of Hormuz. I always applaud a little diplomatic effort here and there, because you always always have to have one before you go and start slamming folks, but this is going to be for naught. The Iranians are not going to open up this passage for anybody, not even the French and the Italians. I think, to be entirely honest with y'all folks, this is probably an effort by the French and the Italians to figure out where things are lying right now. If the Iranians tell them flat out no, we might see that the Charles de Gaulle carrier strike group that the French have formed up as a multinational coalition might also get involved in offensive air operations against the Iranians to also clear the Strait of Hormuz and see the commercial traffic resumes. But moving on from that and on into Germany, we've also been able to hear that apparently, according to Friedrich Merz, who made some statements today at a German Bundeswehr inspection, if I'm not mistaken, he stated the following: 6 out of the 7 G7 countries were clearly of the opinion that sanctions against Russia should not be lifted. We were somewhat surprised to hear this morning that the American government has decided differently. This is definitely not our view. We believe more pressure should be applied on Russia to bring this terrible war to an end as soon as possible. So it appears that every single country in the G7, except for the United States of America, strongly oppose the concept of lifting sanctions on the Russian Federation, even in the midst of the pretty perilous situation we're seeing right now in the Strait of Hormuz, with the fact that no oil is leaving the Middle East at this moment. So it seems as though that's been a fairly unpopular decision, or we can say that it is a fairly unpopular decision. We've also been able to see that several Russian drones have violated Romanian airspace. This video actually showed one Russian drone flying well within Romanian airspace near to the area of Tulsia County on the border with Ukraine.
Oh, look, it's a shitter.
The shithead 136. There it goes. That's the end of that clip. And moving on from that and on into our next clip inside of the Rossiyski Federacy, we were able to hear that apparently today the Russians, you know, for all those alpha chads out there, all those trad guys, you know, although they always crap on the UK a lot about how they have the television license and you've spoken great slander against his majesty's government. Well, Russia's getting there well fast. I mean, they're speed running the whole thing. They're way better than the British by far. And I mean, they're really putting themselves in a good distance away from the British. Like now, that Russian citizens will now need a license from the FSB to use a VPN. That was a great
Oh my god. Can you imagine trying to get a license from the FSB? You got to go down to the local FSB station and say, "Excuse me, Mr. FSB, sir, could I please have a license to use a VPN?" Which instantly makes me look very suspicious right here in the intelligence office of the KGB. And he said, "Yes, indeed, comrade, you can have a license to go behind the bar."
You know, like you go down there, man, it's like, "Yes, I like a license, please, to use a VPN." Why would you want a license? Are you trying to subvert the Great Russian Federation? Put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for subversion of the Russian state. Man, it's going to be something else. I got to tell you right there. But you know something else that's a little bit crazy about this, folks, is that if you don't believe this, this was stated by Andrei Spintsov today, who is the deputy chairman of the State Duma's Committee on Information Policy. This is from a fairly high-up Duma official in the Russian government that this announcement came from today. I get it.
What are you trying to watch, VPN? Are you trying to get on there and see a little bit of Western propaganda? Yeah, a little something, yeah. Are you trying to see the North Korean videos, possibly, or something? There's no...
But honestly, that's insane. Like, could you imagine? I don't think any Russian, that's probably why they did this. I don't think any Russian's going to literally basically turn themselves in and go down to the FSB and say, "Hey, I want that thing that subverts all the internet controls." That's like basically saying, "Hey, come on, Russia, we're going to signal you."
Go on, officer, arrest me and search my... Man,
Go ahead and put me behind the Russian.
and next thing you know, you're going to see an interrogation in the FSB. Who are your contacts? Like, you're really hit them with stuff, and then they're going to turn around and go, "You know, being in an FSB interrogation room is good to That is why you must sign up for boring VPN, or something like that. Boring VPN protects you from all the threats that the FSB can provide. A baton to the ribs just doesn't hurt as much if you have their $19.99 subscription every month. And not just that, but it also allows you to see the prices of other countries. Like, for example, India. You can go and watch Netflix in like quarter price from India. Have you ever thought about that? I bet you haven't. Have you thought about it? Like you look like fighting your territory with a blindfold, you know. But
yeah. Or possibly like they show up down there to the FSB office to get their VPN license, and then they walk in and they're like, hey, excuse me, Mr. FSB, sir, I'm here to apply for my VPN license. And they're like, oh, good, we're glad you arrived. This is the recruitment office, actually, and here's your SMO paperwork. Go ahead and sign right there for us.
Man, like, dude, oh, that's great that you just arrived. We were about to give you a draft notice. Like, it's like, yes, we have it right here. Wait a minute, this looks like you're written with crayon. Well, you know, it's a busy time these days for the Russian government. But anyways, moving on from that, gotta say, the Russians know, they know how to run a real authoritarian state. Look at that. I think, folks, that's what America needs. We need authoritarianism like that, because nothing ever says the people are truly being respected rather than putting a boot on everyone's face every day, no matter how much they like it or dislike it. It's a great thing. But moving on from that, we also were able to see down in the Affinity that the Russians were running out of refineries. The Ukrainians hit another.
Know what it means to feel them die.
We also got another one.
Cool her off. Keep the heat on.
Oh man, we sound like the guy from that Sopranos. How much more disrespect can I take? You know, like when we go, like, but anyways, moving on from that.
They call it a preemptive strike.
That's Christian. Like, they call it a preemptive strike, Chief. That's when you bomb stuff in my bed, which, I don't know, like, it's a bit in your face. Moving on from that, it's time for us to get on up to the Ukraine border. We don't have a whole lot of it, unfortunately, today, folks, but we do have some. Moving us on into our location now, we did get the Russian cashier report.
We'll make it quick.
Alex, before we get on into that, though, we actually have a boat. A little boat. And a lot of people are currently talking about that. And what are you thinking about that? What are you thinking about that?
Okay, so Russia is continuing an internet blackout, by the way, inside of Moscow. Like I told today, they started whitelisting some internet applications today, basically letting them have access to the internet once again, because you couldn't get a taxi, you couldn't call or do anything that required an internet connection inside of central Moscow, because if only Putin turned off the internet, he'd be paranoid. So that was the whole situation. And now on top of that, they're expanding the censorship. They're requiring the license to get a VPN, which completely puts the idea of a VPN on its head. The whole point of VPN is privacy, and having to go get a license for it and literally put your name and your address and everything like that on the license pretty much runs the whole point of a VPN to a large point. So what are your thoughts? 52% says something is about to happen. Well, 35% says paranoid and precautions. Well, 6% said I'm 50-50. And I think something's about to happen. They are expanding this thing rapidly. Whatever's going on right now inside of Moscow, I think that they're either about to call a full mobilization, and they know the backlash is going to be severe, and they're trying to get ahead of that, or there's already some rumblings that people are not happy with what's going on with the economy inside of Russia, and they might be planning something. Something is going on, because this is way more than just paranoia. But unfortunately, what say you?
Something's about to happen. I mean, I definitely 100%. If they're going through this much effort to make sure that nobody can try and have any sense of privacy on the internet, the Russians can surveil basically everything that they're doing, something's got to be brewing. I mean, they don't just do that out of greed for no reason at all. So I generally agree with 100%. Something certainly has to be happening. They're putting so much effort into trying to monitor what everyone in Russia is saying. Something that's going to be happening here in the future. But with that, I hope that we have been able to address that well. Moving on out of that little bit of news, on up into the area of the northeastern front, we were able to see that the Ukrainians were intercepting some more drones. You know, the way that the U.S. could be in the Middle East here soon, hopefully. There goes the Lancet, Salazalazing, and a couple of the crappy ones that the Russians make that are like $50, I think.
Don't let those arachnoids cool her off. Keep the heat
Those are
on.
rough.
They make those out of stuff they found in the bin.
Nah, put it in the bin.
Bin. I'm just trying to enjoy a nice day in my bin in my driveway. What are you looking at?
Was that an aluminum can?
That could be possible. It could be. You know those science experiments that they get the kids to do stuff like that. They'll go with the one Sprite can with a string to the other one. It could be some tech like that, high tech.
Put your tin can with a string with a bomb in it. It's like, I don't think that's effective. Like, something about that, folks, is telling me that might not be too effective. That might not be too effective. But anyway, moving on from that, we also get to see the Ukrainians making sure to clear out the front. The 77th Air Motor Brigade was in between the Spatobe and Kupiansk area, making sure to take care of business. They standing on that business. And also, I've seen some people while we watch this clip, the Ukrainians doing their work, I've seen some people saying, oh, y'all are so stupid taking a couple of statements from an elected official and saying that's what he really means, because that's clearly not what he means. If someone is so mysterious that whatever they say cannot be taken at face value, then that person should not even be in office at all. I mean, like, if literally what they say cannot be taken at face value ever, why the hell are they even in charge? I mean, that means they're lying about everything according to people who are saying that, and that's not good. Like, I think we can all kind of agree that would be a good thing if that really is the case of what y'all are saying. We actually have some breaking news coming out. Before we get to that, we're going to have this break here, and then we're going to get to breaking news.
Looks like the clip's over. Also, we have some big breaking news coming out right this second as well. We are currently hearing some major news out of the Middle East. It looks like we have got video showing now visible from the recent footage we got, showing the fire on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and it looks like it was a drone that hit it. It doesn't look to be incredibly bad damage, but the fire could spread this. So we are a bit concerned about that, but it does look like it got hit. We'll take a look at the footage.
We see the fire there on the U.S. Embassy in this clip. And then in our second clip, we can also see the fire at another angle on the U.S. Embassy. The damage appears to be somewhat minor. It's a fairly sizable fire, but it doesn't appear to be sweeping over a larger part of the embassy.
Thankfully, it's not that bad. I was expecting something bad for a second when I saw that footage earlier. I thought maybe they took a worse hit than that.
Yeah, I was thinking so as well. And moving on from that and on down into the Konstantinivka area of the front lines of Ukraine, we also got to see the 28th Brigade on the Rodygin. I can't believe it's on the Rodygin, drifting down a mud road at 60 miles an hour. We're also about to take a hit. Just keep trucking here in a second, too. I'm not gonna lie, Ukrainian drivers and drone operators are probably some of the best in the world. There was the drone hit, and they keep going. And they're literally Tokyo drifting down the road after being hit by a drone, and they're just keeping at it.
This is skill right here. Look at this guy. He's counter steering like a pro. This dude's a pro. This guy right here, he could be a freaking rally driver. Well, he's even injured too. This dude's doing the one-handed. Look at this. I mean, this is like, I'm not even lying. This is legit skill. This guy's actually a good driver.
You see the guy holding
Dude's effortlessly. Look at that.
I mean, it's with such skill, really. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Man, this guy, and he's even got doo-doo on the way, so he's still like, look at that. He's still pulling this thing off. Look.
Stop those
He's even got a little bit of mud on there, too.
Ukraine's going to probably some of the best drone operators and also rally drivers after this war is over. It's going to be unreal.
Gonna need more than you.
Absolutely unbelievable. You see the guy's a little wounded, but they made it out, which is the more impressive thing about it, and the driving was unbelievable. But moving on from that, while the driving has been unbelievable from the Ukrainians, here's something else a little unbelievable is happening at the moment. This is what we were able to hear today from German SouthVoid inside the Russian Federation. The situation on the front is dire. The enemy has once again gained superiority in the lower skies. Their drones are becoming more numerous, and their quality has changed again. Many drones are using fiber optics, radio drones have changed frequencies, are using mother drones, and so on. Our electronic warfare isn't helping, and even our drone detectors aren't signaling. The enemy is flying in flocks of several hundred drones in swarms. The enemy is currently isolating the lines and the entire combat zone. There are no logistics. Delivering supplies, evacuating wounded, and carrying out rotations are mortally dangerous tasks. In many areas, after the isolation, drone fire strikes begin, followed by a counterattack. The enemy is recapturing its positions. The risk of a major breakthrough cannot be ruled out. Many military personnel say the enemy is preparing a repeat of the fall of 2022 when we lost vast territories, but this time the defeat could be even worse. Organizational and technical countermeasures against drones are urgently needed. New solutions. If the generals and shrines don't put new decisions into effect now, tomorrow will be too late for them too. So generally, from what we're seeing from the Russians, they are stating that there is absolutely no confidence whatsoever that the front can even hold. They're even believing that major breakthroughs like those of the War of the Frontier back in 2022 may be highly likely, even at this point, as the Russian military has been absolutely stretched to the breaking limit. Fighting the war in Ukraine has been something that, surprisingly enough, has been devastating for the Russian armed forces. And they certainly have not seen, especially after Telegram and WhatsApp were banned in Russia, that their combat efficiency has ever returned. They also recently moved off Starlink as well a little while ago, and those three things combined have generally been a fatal combination for the Russians, and they've generally lost the initiative on all fronts at the moment, and the Ukrainians are slowly pushing them back. So it seems as though at the moment it's going to be not so great time for the Russians for the rest of the war. Even with the little economic reprieve that they're going to be getting here in a moment, it's still not going to be a good time. And a lot of people are wondering what's going to be happening here in the near future. Now, Mandy, what are people thinking about this? What are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so if y'all been following the you will know that Russia's been on the back foot for about a month. It's not something new. They've been on the back foot for a minute. So they're apparently losing even more ground from the sounds of it. And now the Russian forces are clearly panicking, as we just read from the Russian back channel right there on Telegram. And they're warning of a major defeat without rescue from Putin's regime. So it's still not going good, and it sounds like it's going so bad that they're openly admitting that they could have a major defeat very soon. So in my opinion, they've already had a major defeat, but they're expecting a catastrophic defeat coming soon. So what are your thoughts? 45% said Russia will not regain momentum, while 29% said Russian lines will actually collapse very soon, and 14% said Ukraine will be the one losing momentum soon. And I don't think Ukraine's going to be losing the momentum. I don't think so. They've been having momentum for several weeks, and there is no sign of that changing. I would say that it's too early to say the Russian lines will completely collapse, because of course, there are heavy defenses behind the lines. Like, we won't make any bones about that. That's going to be a challenge for Ukraine to get through those backline defenses. But it's possible, though, so don't count it out. But I wouldn't say that with certainty. I will say this with certainty, though. Russia is not going to be regaining momentum. They are being pushed back too fast and too rapidly to regain their footing. So they're on the back foot, and I think it's going to stay that way. I'm with the 45%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd agree with 45%. I don't really think the battlefield momentum is ever going to shift back to the Russians. The Russian military materially has been depleted. The Russian personnel, and or at least the competent ones, have generally been depleted as well. It's not really a situation that would be beneficial to an attacking force, much less a defending one. And it's already showing that over the past month, things have been going quite poorly since their almost complete loss of communications, and it really hasn't recovered since. And with that going on for about an entire month, we could be seeing the fronts getting to the point that they just simply cannot survive any longer in these sorts of conditions if they continue for many more months. They might start to see major territorial losses. Very notably, lost 600 kilometers in just the past month, which in terms of the war over the past 3 years, that is the largest ground game that's been seen since 2022 in the Kherson counteroffensive, at least in that period of time, over the course of about a month. So with that in mind, I got to say it's not really looking good for them, and I think the Russians might actually end up getting what's coming to them here in a little bit by a Ukrainian counterattack that might break through and overwhelm them badly enough they could even punch through the back lines before the back lines are even manned or even properly defended by Russian forces at that point. So moving on from that, we have...
Also, real quick, before we get into that, we actually got... Now, did you see this, by the way, in that footage? I'm not sure you saw this, but the hit on the embassy was actually a hit on the C-RAM. It directly smashed the C-RAM. That's apparently what's on fire on top of the embassy. Take a look at that, by the way. The unfortunate was that the C-RAM actually got taken out with that hit.
It looks like a field banana.
Yeah, it really does. That does appear to be where the C-RAM would have been, though. So, obviously, you can't tell from the damage or the wreck. You can't really tell what it was, but we're being told C-RAM. So that's a bad hit.
Let me see if I can find one of these things. Oh, I mean, you know, it could be. I mean, like, that's the little stand that it would be on. It looks like the actual Sea-Wiz gun, if it was there, might have been blown completely off of the pedestal, because I don't see it.
Maybe so. Like, you know, and I think it's a C-RAM. I think. Also, by the way, someone said, "What is a C-RAM?" It's basically a machine gun that has a very advanced targeting system on it, and it's designed as air defense. So it shoots down incoming targets. It can shoot down. I think it can shoot down missiles, or is it only certain targets?
It can shoot down really anything that's close enough.
Okay. So yeah, it basically has a very powerful, very heavy machine gun on it, and it has a very advanced targeting module, and it's able to hit anything within the range apparently. So it's very potent. Like this is like one of the most commonly used air defenses at forward operating bases, to my knowledge. So you know, pretty potent. Unfortunately, it might have got hit.
It may have actually. And also, folks, there's another version of this thing that isn't the C-RAM that's called the C-Whiz, or the Cheese Whiz, some people call it. It's literally the same thing, but it's mounted on ships. And this is the very last line of defense on board most U.S. naval vessels from an incoming attack, because these things only have an effective range of about 3 or 5 miles at the longest. And that means that if something is that close to the ship, this is the last line of defense. So there's two versions, the land version, which is the C-RAM, and the sea-based version, which is the C-Whiz. And together, they make close enough system command, basically. But anyways, moving on from that, unfortunately, of life, at least in this tag, it was just a loss of equipment, which is unfortunate, but not the worst in the world. We have one last piece of news to cover, folks, before we move on and into our questions segment. We've been able to hear from Zelensky that the U.S. doesn't want to play no more. Zelensky stated today, the United States asked that the talks be postponed between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States indefinitely due to the fighting in the Middle East, and Russia does not want to be on U.S. territory. So all talks are now off on the Ukraine war. It went on for a year and 3 months, and now it's completely over. The U.S. is just saying, whatever, don't really care about talks, and walking away. So there you have it. There was a piece the other day or so. It's a year and 3 months later, we just completely abandoned that, and we're just walking off.
No.
Yeah, it's quite bad right there, I must admit. But actually, now that I say it, I'm not sure that's so bad, really, because the talks were actually pointless for the most part. It wasn't achieving anything. Also, by the way, why are the Russians refusing to come to U.S. territory? They came to Alaska. Putin himself came to Alaska. So what's changed with that? I mean, what's really changed?
I don't know. I guess nowadays they're just not that happy about things at this point. I mean, they did go to Miami too, you know, and for some reason they're just nowhere around. Quite interesting.
Yeah, didn't that dude with no chin line go down to Miami just like a day or two ago? Like, he just left that dude that blocked us, the dude that's hypersensitive, the Russian envoy to Putin.
Kirill Dmitriev, the light skin.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I think that's him right there. So, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, the guy who almost got mauled by a bear up in Anchorage. Yeah, that guy. Like, remember him? Remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. That's crazy right there. But yeah, I think he was, but I guess at this point they just said, all right, it's all off, because that's what Zelensky said today. He just said the Americans wrapped it up and walked off. They said, whatever, it's over, and they're done with it. So I gotta say, folks, that's really something. Deal making at its finest. Also, by the way, I just saw Miss Disa bring up that we really didn't bring up the casualty report or talk about it a whole lot. So let me get to that really quickly, folks, and let's talk about it. According to Miss Disa, keeper of the records, 2,071 drones is the 6th highest daily loss. 189 vehicles is ranked the 19th highest, and troop losses are averaging about 900 per day. Over the course of the past 24 hours, we've been able to see that 860 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 5 APCs, 189 supply trucks, 7 main battle tanks, 50 artillery pieces, 2,071 drones, 4 MLRSs, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. And it was a pretty good day overall for the Ukrainians. They're still inflicting pretty significant losses onto the Russian Federation's armed forces, and hopefully we'll see that this will come to an end soon with the Ukrainian victory, I'd hope. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we possibly can, and with that all put together, folks, with a nice little bow and a little pat on the back, we've made it through the news again tonight. Another 2 hours and 20 minutes of news. And I gotta thank you all so much for watching. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to see that so many of y'all continue to enjoy this channel day in and day out. It really is something amazing to know that a lot of people love the channel and love the news coverage that we do. We put a lot of honor and pride into it, and we want to make sure that we report the highest quality news and the best news that we can. Not as far as the news being good, but as far as the news being well researched and covered, we try our best on that. And it also appears, folks, that many of y'all are watching to the point that we were number 15 in America for live streams the other day, which is pretty wild to see. We're very honored to know that so many people are watching the channel. At this point, we're basically up in the top 20 every single day. He's sometimes even up in the top 10. And that's something that we're wildly honored and greatly appreciative to know that many of y'all enjoy this news, that we're that high up in the United States these days for viewership on shows. So with that,
Bringing the best ratings. Nobody can dispute that. Nobody can. They said, I want to litigate it, sir. I want to litigate it. I said, no litigation. No litigation. It's not for debate. It's a settled deal. A deal. It's settled deal.
I gotta say, I definitely have to say. Also, someone just said, clown take regarding talks pause. Obviously, U.S. soldiers' lives are more important. What's Witkoff supposed to do? Run out there and shield the soldiers with his arms? He's got nothing to do. Like if they wanted to keep talks going with the Russians, they could keep talks going with the Russians. The diplomatic teams have nothing to do with protecting U.S. soldiers, and they're not even talking to Iran right now, from what we know either. And you can also have you can have like 2 special envoys. You don't just have to have one. You can have multiple negotiation teams that just specialize in a certain field, like talks with Russia or talks with Iran or dealing with China. Like, I don't know what you're getting at here, but I mean, like, Witkoff isn't going to turn into a human shield and go, like, put his arms around a U.S. soldier and say, I'll save you, and, like, make sure the guy lives. That's